finding a common language again. Maybe that's God's will.
How can we really know? He's absent from the stage.
Maybe it's beyond words. Maybe we should do like the prophets and open our hearts and truly listen.
Dreams will fly as I hit the ground. You ask me why, but I can't make a sound. 'Cause time moves slow. Move slowly now. And it's all you have to live for. Then you stand there alone, chasing your mind in circles as you see it come undone. After all the thoughts have faded, and still you stay the same. And after all the years are wasted, only silence will remain.
Dear friends, family, and all subscribers, and anyone who happened to stumble upon this video, maybe the truth has been here all along. Maybe the truth is a vibrating communication wave that's electromagnetic in nature and that is available to everyone at all times. If we could simply just put away our dogmas and predetermined notion that we know everything and that we already understand how everything works. The truth is, we've always known, and the truth has always been electromagnetic. Please, I strongly suggest that everyone takes part in trying to make a change. Whatever little amount you can do, whether it be holding a door or sharing a smile, makes a difference. Is DNA the next internet? I get lots of suggestions for stories, and I really appreciate them. But some of them are too good to be true. For an example of this was a story of a giant human skeleton, maybe 40 feet tall, that was discovered by a Russian archaeological team. The story had photos and links accompanying it and looked promising, but when the links were researched, they went in a circle. Each link used the other link as its source. Finally, the elements of the photos turned up, and we recognized a good Photoshop had fooled everyone. I had this same experience this week when I was sent an article where a Russian, again scientist, Pyotr Karjajev, had managed to intercept communication from a DNA molecule in the form of an ultraviolet photon, light. What's more, he claimed to have captured this communication from one organism, a frog embryo, with a laser beam, and then transmitted it to another organism, DNA, a salamander embryo, causing the latter embryo to develop into a frog. Dr. Karjajev claims that this communication is not something that happens only inside the individual cells or between one cell and another. He claims organisms use this light to talk to other organisms and suggested that this could explain telepathy and ESP. It was like human beings already had their own wireless internet based on our DNA. I tried to find a scientific journal that had this experiment. All I could find were blogs and other websites that carried the same story, word for word, without any references. That is until I stumbled upon the work of Fritz Albert Popp. Then everything I had just read seemed very plausible. Fritz Elper Pop thought he'd discovered a cure for cancer, and I'm not sure that he didn't. It was 1970, and Pop, a theoretical biophysicist at the University of Marburg in Germany, had been teaching radiology, the interaction of electromagnetic radiation on biological systems. Pop was too early to worry about things like cell phones and microwave towers, which are now commonly linked with cancers and leukemia. His world was much smaller. He'd been examining two almost identical molecules, benzo-A-pyrene, a polycyclic hydrocarbon known to be one of the most lethal carcinogens to humans, and its twins, save for a tiny alternation in its molecular makeup, benzo-E-pyrene. He had illuminated both molecules with ultraviolet light in an attempt to find exactly what made these two almost identical molecules so different. Pop chose to work specifically with UV light because of the experiments of a Russian biologist named Alexander Gershowitz, who, while working with onions in 1923, discovered that the roots could stimulate a neighboring plant's roots if the two adjacent plants were in quartz glass pots, but not if they were in silicon glass pots. The only difference being that the silicon filtered UV wavelengths of light while the quartz did not. Gershowitz theorized that onion roots could communicate with each other by ultraviolet light. All vibrations of energy are part of the electromagnetic spectrum. These include electrical energy, heat, sound, light, radio waves, and radioactive waves. UV light is merely a small portion of the spectrum of EM energy with a very short wavelength. What Pop discovered was that the benzo-A-pyrene, the cancer-producing molecule, absorbed the UV light, then re-emitted it at a completely different frequency. It was a light scrambler. The benzo-E-pyrene, harmless to humans, allowed the UV light to pass through it unaltered. Pop was puzzled by the difference and continued to experiment with UV light and other compounds. He performed his test on 37 different chemicals, some cancer-causing, some not. After a while, he was able to predict which substances could cause cancer in every instance. The compounds that were carcinogenic took the UV light, absorbed it, and changed or scrambled the frequency. There was another odd property of these compounds. Each of the carcinogens reacted only to light at a specific frequency, 380 nanometers. Pop kept wondering why a cancer-causing substance would be a light scrambler. He began reading scientific literature specifically about human biological reactions and came across information about another phenomenon called photorepair. It is well known from biological laboratory experiments that if you blast a cell with UV light so that 99% of the cell, including its DNA, is destroyed, you can almost entirely repair the damage in a single day just by illuminating the cell with the same wavelength at a much weaker intensity. To this day, scientists don't understand the phenomenon called photorepair, but no one has disputed it. Pop also knew that patients with ectoderma pigmentosum eventually die of skin cancer because the photorepair system can't repair solar damage. He was also struck by the fact that the photorepair works most efficiently at 380 nanometers, the same frequency that the cancer-causing compounds react to and scramble. This was where Pop made his logical leap. If the carcinogens only react to this frequency, it must somehow be linked to photorepair. If so, this would mean that there must be some kind of light in the body responsible for photorepair. A compound must cause cancer because it permanently blocks this light and scrambles it. So photorepair can't work anymore. It seemed logical, but was it true? Pop was freaked out by this. He wrote about it in a paper, and a prestigious medical journal agreed to publish it. Not long after that, Pop was approached by a student named Bernard Ruth, who asked Pop to supervise his work for his doctoral dissertation. Pop told Ruth he was prepared to do so if the student could only show that light was emanating from the human body. This meeting was fortuitous for Pop because Ruth happened to be an excellent experimental physicist. Ruth thought the idea was ridiculous and immediately set out to work building an equipment to prove Pop's hypothesis wrong. Within 2 years, Ruth had constructed a machine resembling a big X-ray detector which used a photomultiplier to count light, photon by photon. Even today, it is still one of the best pieces of equipment in the field. The machine had to be highly sensitive because it had to measure what Pop assumed would have been weak emissions. In an old documentary film taken in the laboratory, the International Institute of Biophysics, Pop opens a chamber about the size of a bread box. He places a fresh cutting from a plant and a wooden match in the plastic container inside the dark chamber and closed the light-proof door. Immediately he switches on the photomultiplier and the image shows up on the computer screen. The matchstick is black while the green glowing silhouette of the leaves is clearly visible. Dr. Pop exclaims, "We know now today that man is essentially a being of light." In 1976, they were ready for their first test with cucumber seedlings. The photomultiplier showed that photons of light waves of a surprisingly high intensity were being emitted from the seedlings. In case the light had to do with an effect of photosynthesis, they decided their next test with potatoes would be to grow the seedling plants in the dark. This time, when the seedlings were placed in the photomultiplier, they registered an even higher intensity of light. What's more, the photons in the living systems they'd examined were more coherent than anything they'd ever seen. Pop began thinking about light in nature. Light was present in plants and was used during photosynthesis. When we eat plant foods, he thought, it must be that we take up the photons and store them. When we consume broccoli, for example, and digest it, it is metabolized into carbon dioxide and water, plus the light stored from the sun in photosynthesis. We extract the CO2 and eliminate the water, but the light, an EM wave, must be stored. When taken in by the body, the energy of these photons dissipates and becomes distributed over the entire spectrum of EM frequencies, from the lowest to the highest. This energy is the driving force for all molecules in our body. Before any chemical reaction can occur, at least one electron must be activated by a photon with a certain wavelength and enough energy. The biochemist and Nobel Prize winner Linginger mentions in his textbook that some reactions in the living cell happen quite a lot faster than what corresponds to 37 degrees temperature. This explanation seems to be that the body purposely directs chemical reactions by means of electromagnetic vibrations, biophotons. Photons switch on the body's processes like an orchestra conductor, bringing in each individual instrument into a collective sound. At different frequencies, they perform different functions. Pop found that molecules and cells responded to certain frequencies, and that a range of vibrations from the photons caused a variety of frequencies in other molecules of the body. This theory has been supported by Dr. Vyacheslav Vachenkov, who now heads the Center of Multidisciplinary Research and Engineering, Institute of Nuclear Science, Vinca. She dared to ask the question that has forever puzzled cellular biologists. What is it that enabled the tens of thousands of different kinds of molecules in the living organisms to recognize their specific targets? Living processes depend on selective interactions between particular molecules, and that is true for basic metabolism to the subtlest nuances of emotion. It's like trying to find a friend in a very, very big, crowded, dark ballroom. The conventional picture of a cell, even now, is that of a bag of molecules dissolved in water. And through bumping into one another by chance, random collisions, these molecules that have complementary shapes lock onto each other so that the appropriate biochemical reactions can take place. This lock and key model has been refined to a more flexible and realistic induced fit hypothesis that allows each molecule to change shape slightly to fit the other better after they get in touch, but the main idea remains the same. It is supposed to explain how enzymes can recognize the respective substances, how antibodies in the immune system can grab onto specific foreign invaders and disarm them. By extension, that's how proteins can dock with different partner proteins, or latch on to specific nucleic acids to control gene expression, or assemble ribosomes for translating proteins or other multi-molecular complexes that modify the genetic message in various ways. But with thousands or even hundreds of thousands of reactions happening each second in just one cell, this seems pushing the quote mechanical unquote concept a bit too far. What has been proposed is that somehow each molecule sends out a unique electromagnetic field that can sense the field of the complementary molecule. It's as if there is a dance in the cellular medium, and the molecules move to the rhythm. The music is supplied by the biophoton. Veljkovic and Kosick propose that the molecular interactions are electrical in nature, and they take place over distances that are large compared with the size of the molecules. Kosick later introduced the idea of dynamic electromagnetic field interactions, that molecules recognize their particular targets and vice versa by electromagnetic resonance. In other words, the molecules send out specific frequencies of electromagnetic waves which not only enable them to see and hear each other, as both photon and phonon modes exist in electromagnetic waves, but also to influence each other at a distance and become ineluctably drawn to each other if vibrating out of phase in a complementary way. The real bioinformatics revolution. Quote, there are about 100,000 chemical reactions happening in every cell each second. The chemical reaction can only happen if the molecule which is reacting is excited by a photon. Once the photon has excited a reaction, it returns to the field and is available for more reactions. We are swimming in an ocean of light, unquote. These biophoton emissions, as Pop called them, provided an ideal communication system for the transfer of information to many cells across the organism. But the single most important question remained: where was the light coming from? A particularly gifted student talked him into another experiment. It is known that when ethidium bromide is applied to samples of DNA, it initiates itself in between the base pairs of the double helix, causing DNA to unwind. The student suggested that after applying the chemical, they measure the light coming from the sample. Pop found that the greater the concentration of ethidium, the more the DNA unraveled. But also, the stronger the intensity of light, conversely, the less he used, the less light was emitted. He also found that the DNA could send out a wide range of frequencies, some of which seemed to be linked to certain functions. If DNA stored this light, it would naturally emit more light on being unzipped. These and other studies proved to Pop that one of the most essential sources of light in biophoton emissions was DNA. DNA was like the master tuning fork of the body. It would strike a particular frequency and a certain molecules would follow. It was possible, he realized, that he had stumbled upon the missing link in current DNA theory that could account for perhaps the greatest miracle of all in human biology: how a single cell can turn into a fully formed human being. So just to recap, cells are controlled, operated, and instructed by electromagnetic light waves, and we are all swimming in a giant ocean of electromagnetic soup, and in this ocean we can find all the knowledge, truth, and understanding that we might search for. So in closing, I'd like to thank all the scientists and regular people around the world, just like me and you, for all they do. And I'd like to just take a moment and say,
as you see